Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad that I was able to get everybody's attention this afternoon. I just want to talk a little bit about adoption, and not necessarily the process of adoption, more about what an adopted child's needs are, and as well as adopted families and what goes on, and how important it is for society to understand how it's so much more beneficial if you are supportive. I'm going to just tell you a little story first to give you a little outline. Gisela Irizarry, a 16-year-old pregnant teen, lies in a bed in a large room amongst many other pregnant teens as she is forced to live in a shelter during her entire pregnancy. This was back in 1968, and in those times, or in her family, they chose that they'd rather her live in this shelter until she had her baby, and her mother's decision was that after she had a baby, she would be given up for adoption. So anyhow, for about 6 months, Gisela lived in this home with complete strangers. Gisela's of Puerto Rican descent and Caucasian, and was the only white woman in this entire home. So basically, she lived in this environment for about 6 months because she didn't talk about her pregnancy until she was already in her 4th month. So during that time, all she had and all she knew was herself and the baby within her. So as we whom have had children know the feelings of the kicking in your belly and the experiences that a mother goes through that you want to share with your dad, with the baby's dad, or your own parents or your family, she had no one but herself. On April 7th, 1969, Gisela went into labor, and she was in labor for 11 hours and 25 minutes. Alone, again, no husband, no boyfriend, no family at all. So again, think about it, 16 years old, you're in an environment, you have no idea what you're going through, the pain, everything. And at the end, she's given the opportunity, actually she finally gave birth on April 8th, 1969 at 5:05 a.m. and she was given her daughter, whom she named Maryann, and about 5 minutes later, she was taken from her and given to the home. So anyhow, the decision of that was from her mother, and because she was 16, she had no legal rights whatsoever to fight it, and she did try. So basically, that's Gisela. Maryann is adopted by a wonderful family and lives basically a normal life. She never feels bad about being adopted, always feels just like a normal daughter, just like her friends, never feels less loved or spoiled because she's adopted and not natural, just always basically normal life. Growing up, she does think of her birth mother, and she tries to wonder what she could be like or why she gave her up for adoption, and more or less spends a lot of time trying to think of scenarios of what could have happened. And truthfully, it's more or less the most negative possible scenario she could think of, so that she could say to herself, well, if she was raped, or maybe she was 40, had 3 kids and didn't want another. The reason why those thoughts happened were to say, well, worst case scenario, would you never want to meet her? Would you forgive her? And the answer always was absolutely. It doesn't matter why. Basically, growing up in her family felt normal, except for the fact cousins all looked alike. They had similarities that she didn't have to share with them. Silly little things. They all had a birthmark on the back of their neck that they complained about all the time, because whenever they wore their hair up, they had this purple, ugly-looking mark. And Maryann pretended, oh, I'm glad that I don't have that, but really only wish to have some kind of similarity to someone. Basically, she spent most of her life lying, or feeling like she was lying, because she was telling stories of a family that she was convinced was her family, but really knew that, her great-great-grandmother didn't live or come from Italy, but she really had no idea where she was from. And unfortunately, growing up like that and having wonderful parents, you don't ever want to hurt them. So, as an adopted kid, instead of thinking about yourself, you don't talk about it, you don't ask questions, you don't want to hurt anyone, so it just stays inside. And it causes problems that the outside world cannot understand. If you're not in someone's shoes and living that life, you cannot understand, well, what's the difference? People will say, what's the big deal? What's the difference? And if you have such a wonderful life, why would it matter? What does it matter? But believe me, it matters. And research and statistics and psychological journals state that not only does it matter, it's innate, meaning when you are born, a baby does not know it's no longer part of its mother's body for 2 months. So you give birth, those 40 weeks that your child is inside of you, it takes 2 months after to even know it's not part of you. So when that unnatural separation takes place, it causes what's considered basically what's called the primal wound, which is basically like a tattoo on your soul and your inner being that will never go away. You don't even think about it. It's subconscious, but it affects everything you do in life. So the entire point of this conversation is to make society understand that instead of making these children who, yeah, they've been given a wonderful life, but why should they feel bad for it? Why shouldn't they be supported and proud to say, you know what, I'd like to meet the woman who gave me life so that I could thank her every day for giving me this opportunity. Or as well as adoptive parents need to realize this isn't about them. It's about where this person that they love so much came from and having the completion of the circle of their life. Because someone said once, how can you live in peace when you don't have all the pieces? And in order to live in peace, you need to have all those pieces, and it's true. So basically, to sum up very quickly, it's very, very important in the outcome that adoptive parents can have in a relationship with their adopted children by being supportive and giving them back everything you expect of them their entire childhood. They're expected to live your life. So as adults, they expect you to support them to live their lives. And that's basically it. Does anybody have any questions or curiosities or concerns?
You just mentioned a while ago, it's not a negative, it's an emotional reaction. When you start bringing it to a adopted child who grew up in a nice neighborhood, they will be willing and able to tell you exactly what, I love to meet my
Exactly. So that's where the problem lies, because the problem lies is it's not necessarily the adopted child.
No.
It's the stigma for the adoptive parents. To them, they've lived their life basically being that child's parent. So now if that child starts talking about someone else that was a parent, it's like a stamp on their heart. Basically, that's it. Go ahead. You could